Welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon, and today I'm talking with Amazon best-selling author John Browning. Hello, John. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are welcome. It's always fun to talk with you. John is the author of the book, Build a Life, Not a Portfolio. And we're looking forward to learning about John and how he is helping people live a great life without worrying about money. So, John, it should be a great conversation today because I know a lot of us worry about money. So let me ask you, John, first when we get into this, let's help our listeners get to know you a bit and give us a quick background on you and your company and your business.
Sure. My business is Guardian Rock Wealth, and my background comes from big Wall Street firms. The biggest ones out there is where I've been. I can't name names, but unless you talk to me on a one-on-one basis, but you name the large firm, I've probably been part of it at one point or another, and doing a lot of portfolio management. But probably more importantly, where I started was in customer service, and that was way back almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And of course, at the time, I didn't think that was a very good idea because, I just got out of college. I knew everything. So I should be running the company. But what I learned and discovered was that was the best place for me at the time, as we so often do as we get a little bit older. And what I learned from that is the value of detail and why people invest their money, not just why we put XYZ security or company or business into the portfolio, but the real emotional connection and the need and desire to accomplish their purposes in life. And that's really what we do at Guardian Rock Wealth. It hasn't been too long ago that what I really discovered is, after spending decades on Wall Street managing those big portfolios, that what I really enjoyed doing was talking to people like yourself and really getting to know the person and managing not just their portfolios, but helping them decide and manage their life.
Yeah.
And how they wanted to build that life. And anytime you're building a life, you have plans, goals, hopes, dreams that require planning and financial wherewithal to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's what I do now.
Well, that's really cool, and that's a different perspective, and that's what I love. When you wrote your book, and inside the book, people get a real good feel for you and why you do that, because so many times in financial planning, we focus on the numbers or maybe the portfolio, the stock, and the balancing act of that, versus realizing that's just a component that really is put in place to help me have the life that I want to have, both now and sometime in the future, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so many financial advisors and people in general don't recognize the connection there. And it's an extremely important one, and one that we start with. Our process is to actually start with the individual and then build from there.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and you do a great job of talking about that in your book. Tell us a little bit about your book. And I mean, you've been doing financial advising, and you've been in this industry for 30 some odd years. Why did you write the book? What are you wanting to communicate to people? What are you wanting to help people learn and understand through your book, John?
Well, what I want people to understand, first of all, is that, again, just to reiterate, is that your portfolio is built on a foundation of what you want your life to be. And when we start there, we start with that foundation. Anytime you build a building, I don't know if you've ever, witnessed that or helped with that or something like that, but it's amazing how long it takes to build that foundation. And then the rest of the building goes up relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But it's so important to get that foundation down. And that foundation, when you're building a life, is really, number one, what you want to get out of it, but then asking the very important 3-letter question: which is why. And a lot of people think they want to get to this big lofty goal sometime in the future, but they never consider why. And I believe that that's really why we see so many very successful people be frankly depressed. It's because they accomplished that big goal and they didn't really understand why they wanted it. And that's a huge problem. So we start with, well, our first question is, what does money mean to you? And from there, we ask a lot of questions. And the most important one is, why do you feel that way? And that's where we start. And that's how that foundation gets built. And then building the portfolio around that, that's what I've done for the past 3 decades. And that part comes naturally to me. And that's really, I don't want to say it's easy, because it's certainly not easy, but if you get the foundation right, it comes easier.
Right. Well, it's probably easier than digging out the answers to the questions, because so many of us don't really understand, and we're following, or we're looking for a number, thinking, like you said, that number is going to make us happy, when in reality, it doesn't many times. And if we're sacrificing our life now for 20 or 30 or 40 years to get to something later, we're really missing the journey. And the two can come together, because there are a lot of things in a financial life that I may want to do, whether it's travel or save to send my kids to college or buy a second house or something. That all plays into building a life versus building my portfolio. And that's why that answering that question of why is so vital.
That's right. I think so many people miss out on the life right now because they're trying to, first of all, they're trying to figure it out on their own. And, for whatever reason, and I do understand this, they don't trust a financial advisor. And it's just like anything else. If, I know a little bit about electrical wiring. I know a little bit about plumbing, and I'll do minor projects. But when it comes to my house, I call the plumber, I call the electrician. And it's amazing to me how many people don't call a financial advisor and don't use. It's what we do. It's what we've trained for and we've done for so many years. And it's just like in your profession or in the profession that whoever we're talking to, they're very good at that, right? But if they try and do something else, they're not going to be quite as professional at it,
right?
Most likely.
Well, that's true. And having a challenge with electrical circuits or plumbing is one thing. Making a mistake in your financial investing is quite another. And that's why it is important for people to have somebody like you on their team. Really, it's not like we delegate it all to you and say, "Hey, John, just go do it." No, it's an interactive process. You become part of the family in a sense. Let me ask you, John, what are some of the challenges that you see people facing? Let's say even before they would come work with you, what are the challenges that most people face as they're thinking about life finances and building a portfolio?
We see all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. And I think, unfortunately, we often see people after they've made a big mistake. They've lost a lot of money. They don't really understand why they lost that money, or maybe they do. And they realize that they need a professional money manager, somebody who's done this before. We also see people as they get closer to retirement, and we just hope and pray that it's not too late, because time is such an important factor. It's the one factor that we can't control, we can't make more of, and we really don't know how much that we have. And yet people ignore that factor so often. And sometimes they don't come to us until after they've already retired, and maybe they haven't had a plan and really saved enough. Other times we get them a little bit before, but not enough before to make a big enough difference. What we really like is when that 30 or 40-year-old comes to us and say, "Listen, I'm a really good computer programmer, or a really good plumber, or a really good maintenance guy," or whatever it is that they do, and they say, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Can you please help me plan? And that's our ideal situation. And we do get that occasionally, but more often than not, they're just a few years away from retirement or in retirement, and they're realizing that they need what we call a Paycheck Replacement Program. And we do a lot of consulting on that.
Okay, you're you need to stop, and that's a good one, John. A paycheck replacement program. Explain that.
It's I use that all the time, because what many people don't realize is they retire, that paycheck is gone. That every 2 weeks, every month, that paycheck doesn't show up
coming,
anymore,
doesn't it?
right?
Wow.
You might get Social Security if you're a little bit older. Maybe you still have a pension plan, something like that. But not only do you have to replace your paycheck, you also have to replace all those benefits that we so often take for granted, like healthcare and things like that. So have you planned for that? And is Social Security going to really cover that? And by the way, fixed income now has gotten to the point where the interest rates are so low that the fixed income people are, they're singing that Lionel Richie song. Hello, is it me you're looking for? Right? And they're looking for their income, and it's just not there.
Wow.
So how do you adjust for that, right?
That's great. I love it. So a paycheck replacement plan. I like that, because as you go into retirement, that's true. I guess I never really thought about your paycheck stops. You're really changing from generating income to living on what you've generated. So how do you generate a paycheck for you? That's a great phrase that I think people should really be thinking about. I also liked how you said, John, working with that 35, 40-year-old. That's really when people should be starting, if not before that, because this is a lifelong process, right? It's not something you wait until you're 65 and say, okay, now I need a financial advisor. Well, no. Talk a little bit about that. When's a good time for somebody to reach out to start really laying out a portfolio for life?
As soon as possible. Like I said, time is so important. Einstein said it was the eighth wonder of the world, which is the idea of compounded interest. And again, interest, we really don't have much of that anymore, but the same goes for other types of investing and starting early. One thing is starting early does, if we can get somebody right out of college or even right out of trade school that recognizes the need to get some help, that's ideal, because they don't have to sacrifice as much right now for what they want to build in later years. Mm-hmm. So as early as possible, but certainly we understand and we get the fact that, hey, when you're 20, 25 years old, you're not making your best money yet, right?
That's right.
So it can be harder, but even if it's, $25, $50 out of each paycheck, making sure that you do that. It's amazing how much that adds up. When I started out, I couldn't really afford to put away anything, but as soon as I could, I started putting money into that 401k, and I started setting money aside. And I started out at $20. I still remember it because it was so hard, right? It's like, oh, $20, I really need that. But even starting out like that, over time, suddenly I was 30 years old and I had a fairly good nest egg, and it really kind of sneaks up on you and surprises you. And it's like, hey, wow, I've started working on a really good retirement.
Well, and that's an important thing, because it's that motivation then when you see, wow, I'm making good progress. That motivates you to go from $20 to maybe I could do $50 a month or $100, right? And that's when that compounding interest really takes in place. And it's also the time period when, obviously, if you're that young, you're starting to grow families and different things. Well, you need to be planning for all of those upcoming expenditures and getting education on 401ks and Roths and 403bs and all these other plans that are out there that are really confusing to normal people, John, because I don't say you're a normal guy, because you're a finance guy.
You're saying I'm weird.
You're a bit weird. You're a bit strange in a good sort of way. But it's finding somebody that you can trust to say, hey, John, I don't understand this. At my company, they have a 401k program. Should I do that? And then you would be able to build into them and talk and not just about that, but about, well, how does that play into everything else we're trying to do?
That's right. And it's very individualized, very personalized. It's like on a video like this, we can't get into personal investment advice because we don't know you, right? We don't know who's watching. And we need to ask, 401k plans are generally a little bit different across companies. you're a lot different as an individual and what your hopes and dreams and plans are. So that's very individualized to whether or not you should or shouldn't contribute to your 401k. Almost every situation you should be, but there might be a situation where no, you need to build up, say, that emergency fund first. That can be the most important thing. So there's just a lot of variables.
Yeah, no, that's a great point right there, John. And well, let me ask you, because that was one of my questions is, and I know we can't give advice or anything, but if you could give like one piece of advice that you would normally give to anybody when they're thinking about financial planning as a big rock in their life, is there one or two pieces of advice that you could give everybody to go, here's really where you need to start? You said maybe that's it, the emergency fund or whatever, but where should people just begin?
Well, number one, start early. Number two, be consistent. Consistency is my one word. You and I have talked about that before.
Yes.
And so many people kind of start, stop, and that can really derail your plans. And the third thing is the plan. Have a plan in place that is not just a very rigid plan, but one that can flex with the current situation. I mean, clearly at this point, when you and I are talking right now, we have a pandemic that's been going on. And if your plan wasn't flexible, it can be very, very difficult for people. So that idea of start early, be consistent, and have a plan. Those are my biggest pieces of advice that really encompass just about everybody.
Wow, that's three awesome pieces of advice that anybody can take and start implementing. The other thing, I guess, you mentioned the pandemic. We're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic right now, and the other nice thing about having somebody like you, John, is you're a steadying voice when things go south. Because I know there are a lot of people I'm talking to who have lost a lot of money and they're panicking. They're not sure what to do. But if you have a plan and if you have somebody you can talk to and say, John, talk to us a little bit about the value of having somebody like you, an advisor that we can just call and talk with.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, we did get a lot of phone calls from people who hadn't talked to us before that very much wanted to talk to us right now. And it was, unfortunately, they had already lost a lot of their portfolio. And certainly I don't believe anybody came out unscathed unless they have their entire portfolio in cash, which comes with its whole different set of risks, right? That a lot of people don't fully understand that either. But being prepared for the eventuality that something will happen at some point. And it's really easy after you've had a bull market like we've had recently for so long. It's the longest bull market that's ever happened in my career over the past, 3 decades or so. And it's very easy to get complacent and think, well, this thing's just going to go up forever. And it's really tough to watch your equity side of your portfolio, going straight up, while your fixed income portfolio is not providing the fixed income that you thought it would. And it's like, well, why don't I just go all into equities? And why don't I? And there's other things besides fixed income to provide downside protection, but it's really hard when that market is just going straight up to have the discipline and even to know really what the ratio should be for you and your personal situation. But we can do, we were able to, with our current clients, nobody was really terribly upset. They knew that this could happen because we talk about it all the time, and they were prepared for it. So they're fine. But it's so important, again, to talk to a professional that has the right experience, that's done this for many, many years and actually managed portfolios through all sorts of different environments.
Right. Well, and the other cool thing about you, John, because of your tenure of experience is this is not the first time you've gone through and managed through a downturn. You've done it 2 or 3 times, where if you've got somebody who's a relatively young investor, this may be the first time they've ever seen it. I love that you said you talk about these, because if you're building a portfolio for life, the market goes up, the market comes down. You're going to have ups and downs, and that's just part of it. and having a trusted source like you, somebody who's here's how we navigate storms when they come. It's not if they're going to come; they're going to come. But you know what? We have different sails that we put up, or different buckets. I'm sure you have lots of strategies, and that's the other thing about having somebody like you is you probably have more strategies on financial things than I would ever think of, because that's not my world. And just like somebody listening to this, that's why you need to reach out to John at Guardian Rock Wealth and just have a conversation and start saying, here's where I am. And John and his team sit down and they talk with you. Like he said at the beginning, they want to understand why. They want to understand you before they ever get into the whole portfolio aspect. John, real quick, what could somebody, they're listening to this, they're thinking about reaching out to, what should they expect? Do you have a process that you work? Give me a big view plan of, if somebody reaches out to you and says, okay, I might want to have a conversation, what do the first 2 or 3 steps kind of look like?
Well, again, the very first thing we talk about is what does money mean to you? That's our first question almost all the time. And it's so important to get that. And you would think, well, isn't that the same for everyone? And the answer is absolutely not. We get all sorts of different responses to that. There's usually some common themes, but once we get past that first question, and it tends to be throw people off balance a little bit because they don't expect it. They expect you to say, well, what's your budget? How much money do you have? All that to us is secondary. We want to know what money means to you, and then we want to ask, well, why is that important to you? Because that helps us dig a little bit deeper. And then we ask, when they answer that question, we say, well, why is that important to you? And it's amazing how different the response can be. And one of my favorite things to do is, I always want, if they're married, I like to have the spouses together when I talk to them. So it was like a really important thing for me, because a little bit of an aside, what we found is that, and this is not for me, you can look it up on marriage.com. One of the top reasons for divorce in our country, and actually throughout the world, is not the lack of money, but it's the use of money and no communication about money, because it's uncomfortable. You don't feel like bringing that up, and then suddenly it becomes an irreconcilable difference. And what we find is, when we ask that, what does money mean to you? The husband has one answer, and the wife has sometimes a much different answer.
Yeah.
And sometimes they look at each other and say, like, what do you mean? And it's actually a lot of fun. And it usually ends up to be a great discussion for them, as well as helping us get to know them and what their perceptions are, and what their hopes and dreams really are, and why those are their hopes and dreams. And sometimes what the clients find is that they come in a complete circle, right? They go all the way in 180 degrees, and or maybe 360 degrees, or maybe they only go to 180 degrees, and they're actually headed in a different direction by the time that we're finished with the conversation about not just what's important, but also why it's important. So that's the first part in our process, because so many people focus on, well, I want to beat an index, or I want to be the index, or something like that. And the answer to that is really, no, you don't. You want to be your own index, because we're all different, and you want to manage to your goals, and you want to understand why you have those goals. And those will change over time. There's detours on your roadmap, and we need to be adaptable and flexible for that. So that's really the first part of the process.
Okay. And that process can happen in person, on a online meeting, over the phone, right? It doesn't really matter to you. They would reach out to you probably through your website. Is that how they begin?
Yeah, the website. I'm also on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't hide. So you can always get a hold of me. Our direct line, 312-372-5000. You can get a hold of me that way as well. And yeah, we do this a lot. We do Zoom meetings a lot, not just now, but we've done this whole technology thing all along. We actually have clients across the United States. So this is not unusual to meet this way. And a lot of people want to meet face to face, and we love doing that as well. That's actually a little bit refreshing because so many things are done this way. And of course, now during a pandemic, it's necessitated.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about how can somebody reach out to you, John? And what if they want to get a copy of your book? What are two things? How do they find you? So on social media, is it John Browning? Is it Guardian Rock Wealth? And what's your website? How do they reach out to you?
So our website is www.guardianrockwealth.com. And there's a contact us section, and you can also get to know us a little bit there even before you contact us to see if you like us a little bit. And there's that contact us page. There's a spot to put a note. And so if you just say, listen, I really would be interested in getting your book, we'll make sure you get one of those books in your hands. And I do believe that it provides some value to just about everybody in every situation. They can get some sort of value from it. And that's really why I wrote it. I didn't, write it to be a best-selling author, although it was nice that I am now an Amazon best-selling author. I like that idea, but that's not the real reason. I wanted to get it into as many hands as possible. You can also find me LinkedIn. It's John Browning. That's my personal LinkedIn. We also have a Guardian Rock Wealth page, and we have a Facebook Guardian Rock Wealth page, and you can find me on Facebook just looking up John Browning. So
okay. So
yeah, I don't hide. I'm all over.
I like the fact that you don't hide, John, and that you're very engaging. That's great. I just want to encourage people who are listening here, do get a copy of John's book. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle as well, but you can always get a free copy from John directly. And I'm a big fan of free. So, John, thanks for doing that, and he'll mail a copy out to you. And it really is a good book. It's about 115 or 20 pages, quick read. But what it allows you to do is really get to know John and who he is and how he goes about helping you, build a life, not a portfolio. He wants to help you use your money to support your life, your goals, and that's very personal. And that's why John and his team at Guardian Rock Wealth start with personal questions, understanding who you are and what you really want from life so they can help navigate you down that road. So let me encourage you to get a copy of John's book and reach out to him, guardianrockwealth.com, and go to that contact us page, or find him on Facebook or LinkedIn or, wherever he is. He's all over the place. So, John, thanks again for being with us, being my guest on this interview. And thanks for what you do to help people build a life and not just a portfolio.
Well, thanks for having me, and we'll I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Oh, we will. So thanks for listening today. I trust this interview was as helpful to you as it was to me. Have a great week.